If you've been feeling like you don't fit your old life anymore, this is why. Something in you has changed, and not everyone will understand it, not even you at first, because what you are going through doesn't look like growth. It feels like confusion, isolation, even loss. But what if this is not a breakdown? What if this is a silent transformation that only a few people ever go through? This is the kind of inner experience that separates who you truly are from the identity you constructed to meet expectations, from the mask shaped by family, society, and the need to belong. Over time, that mask becomes so familiar that it feels like you, yet beneath it, something more authentic has always been waiting. In my work, observing the human psyche, I have seen that certain individuals are drawn into what can only be described as an inner initiation, a process that transforms them completely, not through external change, but through a deep and often painful reorganization of their inner world. This process is not gentle, it is not comfortable. It burns away illusions, borrowed identities, and false attachments, leaving behind only what is real and essential. The transformation does not come with clear signs that others can easily recognize. It does not show itself in dramatic declarations or visible milestones. Instead, it appears in subtle shifts, in the way you perceive things, in the way you respond, in the quiet difference in your presence. Often, only those who have gone through something similar can recognize it. You may have already passed through this experience without naming it, without understanding what was happening at the time. You may have thought you were simply struggling, when in reality you were being reshaped at the deepest level of your being. What changes is not always your circumstances, but your energy, your way of existing in the world. There is a depth in you now, something that cannot be easily explained, but can be felt. It speaks of a journey taken alone, a journey through parts of yourself that no one else could walk with you. The signs of this transformation are not achievements to display. They are quiet realizations, markers that something within you has shifted permanently. They are evidence that you have encountered your own truth and have not turned away from it. One of the clearest signs appears in your relationship with solitude. There was a time when being alone felt heavy, like a form of rejection, like something missing. It may have felt like you were cut off from connection, from warmth, from validation, but something has changed. Solitude no longer feels like punishment. It has become a space where you can exist without pressure, without performance, without needing to prove anything. It has become a place where you can simply be. This shift does not happen accidentally. It reflects the quiet resolution of a deep internal conflict, the need for external validation that once drove your choices. When that need loses its control over you, something stabilizes within. You begin to experience a kind of stillness that is not emptiness, but presence. It is not withdrawal, but completeness. You no longer feel the urge to fill every silence, to escape yourself through distractions, or to depend on others to define your worth. Instead, you find that your most important insights emerge in these quiet moments. Without noise, without constant interaction, something deeper begins to speak. You begin to connect with parts of yourself that were previously drowned out. This is not isolation. It is a form of inner dialogue, a relationship with yourself that is grounded, real, and sustaining. At the same time, you begin to see others differently. not with judgment, but with clarity. You notice how many people avoid being alone, how they fill their time with constant stimulation, how they move from one distraction to another to avoid facing themselves. And instead of reacting, you simply recognize it as a pattern you once knew intimately, a pattern you have moved beyond. Another sign emerges in your relationship with your own shadow, the parts of yourself that were once hidden, denied, or rejected. For much of your life, you may have tried to distance yourself from these aspects to appear controlled, kind, acceptable, while suppressing impulses that felt uncomfortable or unacceptable. But something shifts when you begin to face these parts honestly. This process requires courage. It asks you to look directly at what you once avoided, not to destroy it, but to understand it. You begin to recognize your own capacity for anger, for control, for contradiction. You see how easily you could act in ways you once judged in others. And instead of feeling threatened by this realization, you begin to feel grounded by it. Because once you see clearly what exists within you, it no longer controls you from the shadows. You are no longer unaware. You are no longer reacting blindly. You are choosing consciously. What once felt like a flaw becomes a source of strength. Because you understand it, you can work with it, you can direct it. Your anger, for example, is no longer something that erupts uncontrollably or disappears into suppression. It becomes precise, it becomes intentional, it appears when something no longer aligns with your truth, and it guides you to release what is no longer right for you. It becomes a force of clarity rather than destruction. You stop trying to eliminate contradictions within yourself. You stop forcing yourself into a single identity. Instead, you allow opposing aspects of your nature to coexist. You begin to understand that growth does not come from removing tension, but from holding it consciously. And in that tension, something new is created. Your emotional experience also changes. You do not become less sensitive. In fact, your emotional range often expands, but your relationship to those emotions becomes different. You are no longer overwhelmed in the same way. You can feel deeply without losing yourself. You can experience intensity without being consumed by it. You are no longer carried by your emotions. You are present with them. Another transformation appears in the way you respond to others, particularly when it comes to projection. You begin to recognize when people are placing their own unresolved feelings onto you. You notice when someone's reaction is not truly about you, but about something within them that they have not yet faced. And instead of absorbing it, instead of reacting automatically, you observe it. This does not make you cold. It makes you clear. You no longer take on emotional weight that does not belong to you. You no longer feel responsible for fixing what others are not ready to confront. And this creates a new kind of compassion, one that is grounded rather than self-sacrificing. You can be present for others without losing yourself in their experience. You can care without becoming responsible for their outcomes. You understand the difference between supporting someone and enabling them, and this understanding changes the way you engage with the world. There is also a shift in your intuition, where you once relied heavily on logic, analysis, and external validation. You now sense things directly. You feel the underlying patterns in situations. You recognize what is not being said. You notice the subtle signals in people's behavior, the inconsistencies, the deeper motivations. This is not suspicion. It is awareness. It is the result of being more connected to yourself. Because when you are aligned internally, you can perceive externally with greater clarity. You begin to trust this inner knowing, not as something mystical or vague, but as something grounded and reliable. At the same time, you become more aware of synchronicity, of meaningful coincidences that seem to align with your internal state. These moments reinforce a sense that there is a deeper order at work, something beyond conscious planning. And while you do not depend on it, you recognize it. You also develop the ability to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of truth within yourself. One is urgent, reactive, and driven by insecurity. The other is quiet, steady, and persistent. Learning to recognize this difference changes how you make decisions. You begin to act from alignment rather than from pressure. Another significant change appears in your relationship with uncertainty. There was a time when you needed clarity before taking action, when you required guarantees, when you wanted to know exactly how things would unfold. But now you understand that growth happens in the unknown. You no longer wait for perfect conditions. You move forward with trust, not in specific outcomes, but in your ability to handle whatever comes. This is not blind optimism. It is grounded confidence. It is the result of having already faced difficulty and discovering that you can endure it. You also become more selective with your energy. You begin to recognize where your attention is being drained, where your time is being used without purpose, where your presence is not valued. And instead of continuing out of habit or obligation, you begin to choose differently. Your energy becomes intentional. You invest it where there is meaning, where there is growth, where there is alignment, and you withdraw it from what no longer serves you, not with conflict, but with clarity. Another transformation unfolds in your relationship with external validation. There was a time when your sense of worth was tied, even subtly, to how others responded to you. Approval, recognition, attention, these things carried weight. They influenced how you saw yourself, how you made decisions, and how you presented yourself to the world. But something has shifted. That dependence has loosened, and in its place, something far more stable has emerged. You begin to validate your own experience. You trust what you feel without immediately questioning whether it is acceptable, reasonable, or approved by others. This does not make you rigid or closed. It makes you grounded. Feedback from others becomes information, not judgment. Praise does not inflate you. Criticism does not define you. Both pass through you without destabilizing your sense of self. This change frees an enormous amount of energy. You are no longer constantly monitoring how you're perceived. You're no longer adjusting yourself to fit expectations that were never truly yours. You become more consistent, more authentic, because you're no longer performing. And with that authenticity comes a quiet authority, not something you impose, but something others can feel. You begin to move through the world with a different kind of presence. It is not loud. It is not attention-seeking, but it is unmistakable. It comes from being aligned within yourself. You are no longer trying to belong everywhere. You are simply being where you are, fully. At the same time, your relationship with energy itself becomes more refined. You begin to understand that your attention, your time, your emotional investment, these are not unlimited resources. They are finite and they are valuable. And so you begin to choose more carefully where they go. You no longer feel the need to respond to everything, to engage in every conversation, to meet every expectation. You recognize when something drains you without offering anything meaningful in return. And instead of pushing through out of habit or guilt, you step back. Not dramatically, not with resentment, but with clarity. This clarity becomes a form of protection, not through walls, but through awareness. You do not need to defend yourself aggressively because you are no longer placing yourself in situations that require it. You are not closing yourself off. You are simply choosing consciously. As this develops, something else becomes evident. You begin to experience a sense of internal sovereignty, a feeling that your life is truly yours. Not in a controlling way, but in a grounded way. You understand that your choices matter, that where you place your energy shapes your experience, and that you are responsible for that placement. The guilt that once accompanied saying no begins to dissolve. You no longer feel that protecting your energy is selfish. You see it for what it is, necessary. Just as a gardener protects what is growing, you protect what is essential within you. This leads to another shift, one that is perhaps the most subtle, yet the most profound. Your relationship with suffering itself changes. There was a time when pain felt like something to escape, something to avoid, something to resist at all costs. And while that instinct never disappears entirely, your understanding of pain evolves. You begin to see that not all suffering is meaningless. Some of it carries information. Some of it reveals what is out of alignment, what needs to change, what needs to be released. Instead of immediately turning away from discomfort, you begin to listen to it, not to dwell in it, not to seek it, but to understand it. This is a form of transformation that cannot be taught in theory. It can only be lived. You learn through experience that what once felt unbearable can be integrated, that what once overwhelmed you can be understood, and that even difficult emotions can serve a purpose when approached consciously. This does not mean you become indifferent to pain. It means you are no longer defined by it. You no longer build your identity around what has hurt you. You begin to move through it, to extract what it has to offer, and to continue forward without carrying unnecessary weight. With this comes a kind of stillness that is difficult to describe but unmistakable when felt. It is not the absence of movement or emotion. It is a presence beneath everything, a steady center that remains even as life continues to change around you. This stillness is not something you create deliberately. It emerges as a result of everything you have passed through. It is the quiet evidence of integration, and others can feel it, even if they cannot explain it. It draws people, not because you're trying to attract them, but because something in your presence reflects a stability they recognize but may not yet have found in themselves. Your relationship with hope also changes. It becomes less about expecting specific outcomes and more about trusting the process itself. You no longer need things to unfold in a particular way to feel secure. You no longer attach your sense of peace to external results. Instead, you develop a deeper trust, not in what will happen, but in your ability to meet whatever does happen. This is not optimism in the superficial sense. It is something more resilient, something that has been tested It is a confidence that does not depend on circumstances. This marks what can only be described as a second birth, not physical but psychological. You're no longer operating from the same patterns that once shaped you. The conditioning that once guided your reactions, your fears, your decisions, begins to lose its influence. You see it now. You recognize where it came from. And because you can see it, you are no longer unconsciously controlled by it. You begin to choose differently, not perfectly, but consciously. And that alone changes everything. There is a sense of resolution that begins to form, not because everything in your life is perfect, but because something within you is no longer in conflict. The parts of you that once pulled in different directions begin to come into alignment. You're no longer fighting yourself. This does not mean you have eliminated all contradiction. It means you have integrated it. You can hold strength and vulnerability at the same time. You can value connection without losing your independence. You can protect yourself without closing your heart. This integration is what allows your energy to return to you. The energy that was once consumed by internal conflict becomes available again. And what you do with that energy becomes the foundation of your life moving forward. If you recognize yourself in these changes, then you have passed through something significant. Not something visible to the outside world, but something deeply real. You have moved through a process that many never fully encounter, and that those who have not experienced it may not fully understand. This does not make you better than anyone else. It makes you aware. It places you in a position where your presence itself carries meaning. Not because you're trying to teach or influence, but because the way you exist reflects what is possible. And this is not the end of anything. It is the beginning of a different phase. The process of becoming does not stop here. It continues, but now from a different foundation. You're no longer searching in the same way. You are no longer trying to become something you are not. You are returning to yourself more fully, more honestly, more completely. And from that place, everything you create, every relationship you enter, every choice you make carries a different quality. The journey ahead is not about avoiding difficulty or reaching some permanent state of peace. It is about engaging with life from this new level of awareness. It is about bringing your full self into what you experience, without hiding, without performing, without abandoning who you are. Because the soul that has endured its deepest trial is not meant to remain in survival. It is meant to live, to express, to create, to connect from a place that is real. And perhaps the most important realization is this: the person you once believed you needed to become, the ideal you chased, the version of yourself you thought would finally be enough, was never the destination. It was a reflection of limitation, a narrow image compared to what you actually are. What has emerged from this process is not perfection. It is something far more valuable. It is authenticity. It is wholeness. It is the ability to exist without needing to divide yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You're no longer trying to eliminate your contradictions. You're learning to live with them, to understand them, to integrate them. And in doing so, you become complete in a way that cannot be achieved through performance or approval. This is the union of opposites, the reconciliation of everything within you that once felt incompatible: light and shadow, strength and sensitivity, independence and connection. They are no longer in conflict. They are part of the same whole. And from that wholeness, something new becomes possible, not a final destination, but a deeper engagement with life itself. A way of being that is not driven by fear, not shaped by unconscious patterns, but guided by awareness. If you have reached this point, then you're no longer who you were. And that is not something to question. It is something to recognize, because the journey you have completed was never meant to be visible. It was meant to transform you. And now, what comes next is not about proving anything to the world. It is about living from what you have become